In this video, I'm going to go over how to find an inverse of a function. What I've listed for you here are some steps to follow when you are finding the inverse of a function. Step 1 says we need to replace f of x with y. Step 2, we need to swap every x with a y and every y with an x. Step 3, we solve for y. And then step 4, we replace y with the f inverse notation here, where the superscript is a -1 above the f. It's important to note here that these steps sometimes are a little different depending on a book that you may have looked at. So at the end of the day, they are all going to get you to the same place. Sometimes what you'll see is that instead of swapping first, they'll solve for x and then swap afterwards. So if you see it that way, it's the same kind of idea. Just follow whatever steps you're more comfortable with. These are the particular steps that I like to use. So we're going to go over an example of doing this. Before I do, it's important to note that for this to work, the function has to be 1-to-1. So that's just an important piece of back information that you should have already known at this point. But the function needs to be 1-to-1 to be able to have an inverse. All right. I've taken a problem out of a book. We'll do that example and we'll go from there. We have f of x is equal to 2x plus 3 over x minus 1. Now let's follow the steps here and find the inverse of this function. Now the first thing to note is that we need to replace this is step 1, replace f of x with y. So that was step 1. If you saw on the last board, we had the 4 steps. This is step 1. Now step 2 said to replace all the x's with y's and all the y's with x's. So let's do that here. Notice this was previously a y, now it's an x. These were both previously x's, now they're y's. So we've done already 2 of the steps. The third step is always the longest one, at least according to the steps that I have listed. And that is to solve for y. Now, when you're doing this, it's going to be the same way for any type of rational function like this. You're going to use these same techniques in pretty much the same exact order to solve any problem that looks like this or that is a rational function. The first thing that we always do is we multiply both sides by the denominator here of y minus 1. Multiplying both sides by y minus 1 here cancels out this y minus 1 here, so that would go away, and then I'd be left with the y minus 1 on this side. Next up, we need to distribute this x in, so we'll do that here. This x times y is xy, and then x times -1, that's negative x, and this is equal to 2y plus 3. So we didn't do anything to that side. All right, let's come up here now and continue this problem. So we'll come up here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and down here, I'm going to go ahead and write what I would do next, which is, this is important. Anything with a y in it, I'm going to put on one side of the equal sign, and anything that doesn't have a y in it, I want it to be all on the other side of the equal sign. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move this 2y over to this side, and I'm going to move this x over to this side. So those x's go away and those 2 y's go away. Let's write what we have left over here. We have xy minus 2y equals, and then over here we just have 3 plus x. Let's bring this down a little closer. Now what we want to do is factor out the y here. So let's factor that y out. Now that we have this y factored out, we're left with y times x minus 2 is equal to 3 plus x. So we're just factoring the y out here. Finally, we need to divide both sides by x minus 2. And what are we left with after this divides to 1? We have y equals 3 plus x over x minus 2. That is the end of step 3. There's only one more thing left, and it's a very easy step. Step 4, which is just to replace this with the inverse notation. The f inverse of x is equal to and there is our inverse. It's important to note here that x cannot equal 2. So let's recap and go back through just to make sure it's completely understood. Started with the function. We took the f of x, changed it to y. We then swapped the variables y's for x's and x's for y's. We then multiplied both sides by y minus 1 to get here. It's here. We then distributed this x in to get to this part here. Now, once we get here, when we distributed the x, we want the things that have y in it on one side of the equal sign and the things without the y's in it to be on the other side. So we move this 2y to the left and we move this x to the right because this did not have a y in it and this did. Once we did that, this is what we had. We simply factored the y out at this point, and then we divided both sides by x minus 2. That left us with this. Once we got here, it was simple. We just switched dy to the f inverse of x. Now, obviously the bulk of this problem was in step 3, and that's where we went from here to the end here. It's important to note that no matter what this fraction is or what this rational function is, you're going to do these same steps every time. So if you understand this problem, you can do any problem just like it.